All right, let's talk about something that affects every single one of us, every single day: motivation. What actually gets us going?
And I mean, really think about it. What makes you work hard? Is it the paycheck? A little bit of praise? That amazing feeling of a job well done? What's the one thing that gets you out of bed and ready to crush it?
Well, you're not the only one asking. For more than a century, some of the smartest managers, psychologists, and thinkers have been obsessed with that very same question. And their answers has literally built the workplaces we all know today. So we're going to take a journey through that evolution, starting right at the beginning.
Our story kicks off over 100 years ago, in the age of factories and assembly lines. And back then, the view of what makes people tick was, well, it was pretty straightforward, almost mechanical.
And you can thank this guy for that, Frederick Winslow Taylor. He was an American engineer who basically became the father of what we now call the scientific approach to management. And trust me, his ideas completely dominated the early 20th century.
Taylor's big idea was scientific management. At its core, the belief was incredibly simple. Money is the ultimate motivator. That's it. He was a huge fan of the piece rate system, which just means the more stuff you produce, the more cash you get. A direct, no-nonsense line between effort and reward.
This quote just nails his whole philosophy. A fair day's pay for a fair day's work. You know, it's logical. It sounds fair. And honestly, for the kind of manufacturing work that was common back in his day, it made a lot of sense.
So to Taylor, workers were basically cogs in a giant machine. They were driven by one thing and one thing only: money. So what's the best way to manage them? You break down their jobs into tiny, boring, repetitive tasks, and then you watch them like a hawk to make sure they're being efficient. Simple, right? But it kind of leaves out one major thing: the human element.
And that brings us to the next massive leap in thinking. People started to realize that maybe, just maybe, workers aren't just machines. Maybe there's a little more to motivation than just a paycheck.
This is where Elton Mayo and his famous Hawthorne studies come in. It's a fantastic story. He went into a factory to see if better lighting would make people more productive. And it did. But then, and this is the wild part, when they made the lighting worse, productivity went up again. The conclusion was revolutionary. It wasn't about the lights at all. It was about the fact that someone was finally paying attention to the workers. That feeling of recognition, of belonging, that was a powerful motivator. This discovery just blew the doors wide open. If money and the physical environment aren't the whole story, then what are these other human needs that drive us to do good work?
Well, that question was famously answered by Abraham Maslow in his hierarchy of needs. You've probably seen this pyramid before. His theory is that our needs are stacked like levels in a video game. At the very bottom, you've got the absolute basics: food, water, shelter. You have to satisfy those before you can even think about the next level up, which is safety. And only once you feel secure can you start to worry about things like belonging, and then esteem, and finally, way at the top, self-actualization, becoming the best version of yourself. The thing that motivates you is always the need you haven't satisfied yet.
But, of course, the story gets even more interesting. Another psychologist, Frederick Herzberg, came along and said that motivation isn't just one simple scale that goes from unhappy to happy.
Herzberg's two-factor theory is a total game changer. He argued that the things that make you dissatisfied at work are completely separate from the things that make you truly satisfied and motivated. Think of them as two different dials, not one.
And this illustrates it perfectly. On the left, you have what he called hygiene factors. Things like your pay, your working conditions, company policies. Getting these right doesn't make you love your job, it just stops you from hating it. It just brings you to a neutral meh. True motivation, Herzberg said, comes from the motivators on the right. That awesome sense of achievement, getting recognized, having real responsibility, and doing work that you actually find interesting.
And all of this brings us closer to the modern day, where the theories start to focus less on these universal one-size-fits-all rules and more on the individual, because what drives you might be totally different from what drives your coworker. David McClellan came up with a theory that our life experiences basically wire us to be driven by one of three main needs. Are you all about achievement, that drive to excel and just crush your goals? Or maybe you're driven by affiliation, that desire to be part of a team and build great relationships. Or perhaps it's power, the need to have influence and make things happen. McClellan says we all have a little bit of each, but one usually takes the lead.
And finally, we've got Victor Vroom's expectancy theory, which basically frames motivation as a rational calculation we all do in our heads. It breaks down into 3 questions. First, expectancy. If I try harder, can I actually do a better job? Second, instrumentality. If I perform better, am I really going to get that reward they promised? And third, valence. Do I even want this reward in the first place? If the answer to any of these is no, the whole motivation change falls apart.
So there you have it. We've just traveled through a century of incredible ideas, from seeing workers as machines to seeing them as complex individuals making these logical calculations. Let's just do a super quick recap of our journey. Just look at this evolution. In the 1910s, Taylor said it's all about the money. By the 30s, Mayo showed us that social belonging is a huge deal. In the 40s, Maslow gave us that famous pyramid of needs. Come the 60s, Herzberg splits the whole problem in 2. And now, modern theories see it as a deeply personal equation. Each step built on the last, adding another layer of complexity and, frankly, humanity.
Which brings us right back to where we started. After seeing how our understanding has evolved from simple cash incentives to all these complex personal needs, think again. Is it achievement, affiliation, responsibility, security, or is it just about a fair day's pay? What really makes you work hard? The answer, as we've just seen, is rarely that simple.